Women get real. Natalie talks to us about ME and how it affects her day-to-day life.
My name's Natalie Watson. I am going to talk a wee bit about having ME, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. I was first diagnosed with this when I was in fourth year in school doing GCSEs. Um, it had originally started, I was diagnosed with glandular fever, and it came on from that. It was about a year later, and I think I was still a bit in denial that there's something else wrong. I was just saying it was glandular fever. So mum originally just took me to the GP, and to which they had said they thought it would be ME. And at that stage, the waiting list through the NHS was about a year long, maybe a bit more. So my family had decided that they would pay private, and I was seen within the week just to get diagnosed so we knew what was going on. So this really did change and affect my life. As I said, was in the middle of my GCSEs, so I ended up missing some of my science modules for my fourth year exams and just having to do them in fifth year, as I went down to go into school for 2 days a week, and some days maybe wasn't even, some weeks maybe wasn't even making it in the way it was. So I had to completely restructure my routine of everything down to sleep pattern. It would have been I could sleep clock around. So I had to set myself that I was going to bed at a certain time and making sure I was getting up at a certain time. I was advised to not go to bed any earlier than 10:30, which for me was a very big struggle because I could have went to sleep at 7 o'clock if you allowed me to. So I wasn't allowed to watch TV at night, read anything a certain time before, like whenever I got into bed, because the light and reading, it was going to keep my brain more active. So they were looking at me to try and stop that habit. So I got that all sorted, the routine, which started to help bring them round a bit more. I had to go that I wasn't taking any caffeine, which was a bit of a hard thing at the start because I would have drank Lucozade a couple of times a day to try and keep myself that at energy. So the caffeine now, I have to say, I was what, about 15, 16 whenever I was diagnosed, and talking a good 10, 11 years on, I actually haven't drank caffeine, and I don't miss it anymore because it would have given me a fake boost. It would have made me feel that I had more energy, but the come down from that was far worse than what I was the day before, for before I even took a sip of it. So I managed to get that leveled out. I don't actually take a lot of sugary foods anymore. I've cut that back more the last few years because I would have replaced maybe caffeine with Sukies and even like I said, sport and stuff. I wouldn't have drank them as much, but it would have been a bit of a replacement for me. So I've actually cut that back rightly now, and I actually see a difference from it as well. I just kind of drink sugar free and juice stuff now. I've also had different side effects. ME is quite a complex thing in a sense that there's a lot of different ways it can affect you. Like I was going to the gym, and my heart rate was hitting over 200 beats per minute in running on the treadmill for 3 minutes, which ended up in me having to go to the hospital just to get tests and stuff. So I was having to get hooked up to ECGs and run and everything. I would have a slightly faster heart rate from it all, but it's normal enough. I'm aware that it goes higher. I know there's nothing to it. There's been enough tests run on me over a few years just to check it out and make sure. So it does play effect that way. One of the main issues I would actually have from it would be joint pain. I could go that I can hardly lift anything, even down to like my mobile phone can be sore to lift if my joints go really bad. I can go that I can hardly walk or drive the car if they go really bad before. It's all about, I can kind of, now that I've had it so long, manage the signs of it coming along. to try and, even if it is, take a wee bit of Nurofen to try and make it that it's not as sore on me. But once they get sore, there's no real stopping it. It does take a few days to settle, and it can even take up to a few weeks for it to properly settle down for me. Nowadays, my wrist would be the main thing that would get sore, but I've been able to, my shoulders have been sore, the joints, wrists, ankles, knees, the whole works. But that's all part and parcel kind of it, as I've realized over the years. When I was diagnosed with ME in fourth year, I was highly active in sport. I was playing netball. I played it 7 days a week. I was playing school, club, regional, development squads, and had just done trials for the Northern Ireland team. At that time, I ended up having to drop out of doing netball altogether, as I just physically ended up not having the energy to play sport or anything. As I said, I wasn't even able to go to school and stuff that way. So that completely knocked me. I tried to do sport again on and off throughout the years, but I more recently, the last lot of years, I suppose, because I still had school, I went to university, I started working. There was always things that were becoming more of a priority than me actually getting back into sport. Where now I've found that I'm starting to try and prioritize it, to start doing something again, I suppose, for myself, but to also manage the ME, as sport can actually help you with it. I know a lot of it is that the main symptoms are tiredness, but along with the other symptoms that can come along, it does help to be active and sporty at the same time, because I'm not the type of person to let something stop me from doing anything. So I'm not letting it take over that I'm not being active, because it was always a big part of my life. In general, for ME, there's not a lot of help provided. The doctors can diagnose you with it, but there's no proper treatment in place for it, because they don't really properly know what causes it. I know there is a lot more research going into it nowadays to try and come to the bottom of it. I always remember whenever I was diagnosed, I was told I wasn't stereotypical profile for someone that would have it, which didn't really make sense to me, because at the same time they were able to say they don't know where it comes from. So I didn't understand how they would have a stereotypical profile. But due to me having glandular fever, they have now made connections that it can come from having it. It was a case of, I went to the doctor every now and then. I got a load of blood tests run every 6 months to a year type thing, just to make sure there was nothing else, and just for them to be able to go, yes, it definitely is ME, or also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. A lot of things that can help it, I suppose, could be diet, to help have a controlled diet and be aware of what you're eating, just to help manage those flares of being tired and achy and things that way. I find personally what helps me with this is a lot of rest on and off, that I've learned to know my limits. So it's a case of me, maybe if I'm starting to feel tired or any of my symptoms kicking in, maybe lying up for the afternoon rather than pushing on and cleaning the house. Or sometimes I've even found not even going and walking the dog for me, because it's maybe just going to push me too much whenever I have work the next day. It's all about me having to prioritize what is important to do. But don't get me wrong, there's times I just bull on and don't help myself, which I think is normal for everybody. And also getting help from family and friends and stuff has also been a great help with me throughout it all, because they've all been a good support over the years and are all aware that I have it. And if there's times I'm not able to go out for a dinner date, they're all understandable, because I've maybe took flare up with it or something that way. The one thing that I would always kind of consider whenever I start a new job or anything like that is, if I have a flare up, am I going to have to be out of work for a few days? Is it going to affect me that way? And like, even maybe telling employers, it's something I don't always feel the most comfortable with, because I'm scared of it, maybe if them thinking it's going to affect me all the time in my job. Because even some days, like the morning would be my best time for working in general. So the fact of in the afternoons, I can sometimes feel like I'm not as engaged in doing the stuff, but I still am able to work away and do things. I just don't feel like my brain's as active. It gets a bit more foggy and brain fog type thing coming in. People would ask me at times, like, how do you think you would struggle or cope when the day you maybe have a family and work and everything? I suppose it is something that I would think about at times. I'd even think about the fact of being pregnant, because that's a big struggle on someone's body in general without anything. So suffering from the ME with the fatigue and things, I suppose it does concern me at times of how I will cope and how my body will cope with it. But I suppose part of me with that is I'm just thankful that I have a good family support around me that I know would be there to help me. And down to the fact of even having children, I think at the start it could be hard and I would think about that. But I think once I would get a routine and structure of some sort, it would really help me out, because it's something, having a good routine is something that helps me every day. So I think it'll just always be me making sure that there is some sort of routine to get through the day I would ever have children or family, so to say. In the 10 years plus of being diagnosed with ME, there hasn't been a great change in the services and support that's out there. I know it is something that people are trying to fight for, to get us the same support that people that are diagnosed with ME or CFS in England get, because we are still behind. There's, I suppose now through social media and stuff, there's a bit more support groups that way to go on and speak to people to try and get a wee bit more help and support, especially for those that are just diagnosed with it. But in my thoughts with it, from what I've went through in my experience, anybody that is diagnosed, I would say the best thing to try and do is get a proper structured routine. I found that was what helped me, but I suppose it doesn't help everybody because everybody's affected in different ways from it. So let's hope that we do get, there's the proper services and support there for people, especially whenever you're first diagnosed. I feel like that would be very crucial just to give people that bit more guidance.